Welcome classic rock fans to another episode of Classic Song Review, where classic tracks are excavated and explored. And for today's episode I'd like to talk about Lola by the Kinks, a song lifted from this wonderful album. Lola versus Power Man and the Money Ground. Of course this version is actually coupled with the soundtrack for the film Percy as well. Anyway, it's my belief that it was a kind of a seismic shift with sort of the way the Kinks wrote songs in the late 60s, partly brought about maybe due to Ray Davies's breakdown. But certainly Ray Davies starts writing these wonderful sort of vignettes, these sort of laconic snapshots of English life. Effectively the band move away from that kind of purely blues R&B aesthetic to songwriting that becomes much more profound and observational. Especially concerning working class life and sort of middle class pretensions. All those sort of things are sort of satirised in the songwriting of Ray Davies from, I think, from sort of about 66 onwards. Of course, Lola is probably the most famous song by the Kinks outside of Waterloo Sunset, and it tells the story of a young man's encounter in a seedy nightclub with a transvestite. Now, apparently, the story was based on Ray Davies himself has said that Robert Wace, of course, was the band's manager at the time, had danced with a transvestite in a club one evening, and apparently that provided the idea for the song. Of course, there was that story in 2004 in Rolling Stone magazine that Ray Davies had based Lola on the transgender actress Candy Darling, who also featured in Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side. But I'm not sure that's true, to be honest with you. I think Lola is a very brave song, really, considering it was written only 3 years after the Sexual Offences Act of 1967. And there was Ray Davies, of course, writing a song about a young man dancing with a transvestite in a nightclub. Or it could be a transgendered man. I mean, you've got to remember the first transgender operations were happening from the 1950s onwards. But despite the subject matter, the song did not fall foul of the BBC because of that. It fell foul of the BBC due to product placement. Of course, famously, he mentions Coca-Cola in the song. Ray Davies had a flit across the Atlantic to redub Cherry Cola instead of Coca-Cola. No doubt giving some international conglomerate drinks company the idea for another soft drink later on. I don't think Cherry Cola was about in sort of 1970. Could be wrong there, though. But of course the Kinks weren't the only band to sort of have a song banned due to product placement from the BBC. I mean, there was Chuck Berry's Maybelline, also Pink Floyd's It Would Be So Nice, with its reference to a popular selling newspaper. Whilst I was doing some research for this vlog, I actually discovered there was this anti-prohibition song called Every Day Will Be Sunday When the Town Goes Dry by a chap called Edward Meeker. This song was recorded and published around about 1919. Which was effectively just before the Prohibition period starts in the USA. But more interestingly, this song contains the lines, at the table with Lola, they will serve us Coca-Cola. Now I'm just wondering whether or not Ray Davies might have been aware of this song when he wrote Lola. I don't know, I just thought I'd leave that with you. Everything about the way the song starts, I love that opening line. It's the beginning of a narrative, a story, isn't it? I met her in a club down in Old Soho, written in the first person, of course. But what's interesting is I think the use of the gender-specific pronoun her is quite ironic given the context of the song. I also like the line about champagne tasting like cherry cola. It establishes very early on that theme that things aren't always as they appear to be. I love the way this song kind of gently sort of unfolds in many respects, and the way time it kind of takes place over a whole night. For example, they drink champagne and dance all night. She sat me upon her knee, certainly implies helplessness. The term little boy suggests vulnerability and perhaps more importantly innocence and naivety. But her gender orientation is only kind of hinted at throughout the song. For example, adjectives like dark brown to describe her voice, and that wonderful sort of amusing line, when she held me tight she nearly broke my spine. All these, the listener is kind of manoeuvred towards that sort of final climactic moment when the sort of curtain is pulled down and Lola is revealed to be a man. One of my favourite lines from this song comes towards the end, and that is, it's a mixed up, muddled up, shook up world except for Lola. Now the preposition accept is quite interesting here, as it seems to suggest, ironically, that there's a clarity and honesty about the existence or the identity of Lola. Quite an interesting statement really in a song that's essentially one of the major themes is things aren't always as they seem to be. Anyway, you've been watching an episode of Classic Song Review. Please click like, subscribe, check out the Facebook page, but more importantly, please do keep listening.